I'm really excited. I think we can all agree this is a very exciting topic to explore, and one that I at least hadn't heard a lot about before putting this panel together. And I also think it's very timely. We've been seeing a lot of investment recently, past few weeks even, from big food, big drink in cannabis edibles, Coca-Cola, Molson Coors. Yes. Not Coca. Didn't Coca-Cola do something?
Just a rumor.
Oh, it's just a rumor. We're not sure. Constellation. Mostly beverages, actually, interestingly. I'll let the panelists who actually know what they're talking about delve into those details, but a lot of buzz around it. And so I wanted to go ahead and start by letting these panelists do a little bit more of an intro than we have been doing, just because I think this is an area people aren't quite as familiar with, and do 1 to 2 minutes background in who they are, who they work for, and what they're doing in the cannabis edible space. And we'll start right here with Linda.
Okay. This is on. I'm Linda Gilbert. I'm the Managing Director of Consumer Insights for BDS Analytics. We are a company that was established to track trends in cannabis. We, much like Nielsen or IRI, track point-of-sale data in the grocery stores. We do the same for dispensaries. We also conduct a great deal of consumer research with respect to public attitudes about legal cannabis. We currently have a study actually in the field right now that's national here in the U.S. as well as in Canada. My claim to fame has been basically I do trend studies in emerging new categories. So whether it was nutraceuticals back in the day or probiotics or Viagra, now we are doing cannabis. So it's very exciting.
The new Viagra.
Hi, I'm Scott Riefler. I'm the Chief Science Officer for Tarukino. We're a research and development IP company focusing specifically on turning cannabinoids into water-friendly materials, if you will, making them suitable for beverages and food. I'm a material scientist, a chemist, and a certified food scientist.
Hi, I'm Merril Gilbert, and Linda and I are not related, but we're soon to be best friends. So I came to this because I'm from the food and beverage industry. Some of you might have seen me here last year, but really how I ventured into TraceTrust, which is the company I just co-founded, was really based in creating plant-based low-dose edibles. And in that process, we learned that the quality and extracts and the way in which the cannabinoids, both THC and CBD, could be used was really variable. And our pastry chefs made beautiful things, but they were just the dosing. And that dosing story, everyone has one. It's either their personal one or their friend. And so that's when we took a step back, and my partner and co-founder is also the food science part of this and on the compliance side, and we said, you know what, we really should be that authority. And so we are introducing a True Dose, which is a third-party audit system very similar to Fair Trade, certified organic. It runs along the same principles, but it really looks at the entire life cycle of the product, not just the levels of THC and CBD. So we look at what is it telling you on the outside of that package, when you open it up, how easy is it to understand, and then we have a further testing solution that goes out to the lab, specifically looking at individual dose and not the homogeny of the total package.
Okay, thanks, guys. So this is a slide that we put together, and this shows some of the varieties of cannabis edibles that you can buy in a store in Seattle, should you so choose. And it really, I didn't know a lot about cannabis edibles before this panel, but I was really surprised by the variety we have here. And so that kind of leads me into my first question, or really just subject, which is taste. And I think a lot of us, when we think of edibles, we think of like a pot brownie. Probably doesn't taste great. You're not eating it for that. And yet now they've developed ways where it can be completely taste-free. And so what sort of avenues does that open up? As you can see, beverages, chocolates, all sorts of things. Like what are we seeing with this new innovation? What is possible now?
Well, I think, when we talk to consumers, a lot of the problems around edibles have been around grittiness and bitterness of products and so forth. And most of that has been resolved now in terms of the way that products can be formulated. And to Merril's point, the issues now are more around reliable dosing, making sure that consumers are getting the experience that they are expecting. To your taste point, I mean, I have been saying for many, many years, whether we were talking about health foods or whatever, taste is king. It doesn't matter how healthy it is or what it does for you. If it doesn't taste great, in the end, consumers are going to ultimately reject the product. There's a small segment of consumers out there that love to suffer through healthy, but most of us do not. And so what we're seeing is that products are being infused in a way that is very transparent to consumers. But on the other hand, we're also seeing that there are a lot of cannabinoids and terpenes and other things that are present in the cannabis plant that can offer new innovations in terms of introducing new flavors and aromas to consumers. So we see like Lagunitas beer is doing a terpene and hop infused beer. It doesn't contain any THC, but it introduces a new flavor experience to the craft brewery consumer. And I know, Scott, you've done a lot of work in this space.
Yeah, taste is king is one of them. There's several issues or several hurdles that for the edible space that you need to come over. Taste is one of them. Uniformity in products, so food safety, if you will, or consumer safety. Processing techniques have now allowed us to strip away most of the things that add flavor and then add them back at will. The underlying cannabinoids, whether they be CBD or THC, are horribly bitter. So techniques have been developed to hide that bitterness, if you will. So it is correct. We now have the ability to provide emulsions and concentrates that are completely water miscible, will deliver complete homogeneity in the product. Like if you look at one of those beverages, the first drink has to have the same active concentration that the last sip has within. So what we're really doing is taking this to a place where it can be viewed as a food ingredient, something that can be added to the culinary experience without changing it. The ability to formulate your food, cook in the kitchen, or design your beverage however you may like, and then dose on top of that without changing it. Now, that's not universal. There's a variety of technologies out there. Some rely, when you start to read labels, you'll see lots of sugar added or significantly masking flavors like cinnamon put on top. And it's not that they're inferior technologies, they're just not as far along on the evolutionary chain, if you will.
Let me, I just also want to add to that. So when we think about the work that we do, we look at all of these in three different categories. So those beverages, the teas, and anything that is put into an actual shape starts with a master batch, a full batch. It's very, to your point, from the beginning to the end, it's very trackable. We then look, if you look in that upper left corner at the blueberries and the coffee beans, and the popcorn are their regular shapes. And so this is where that whole conversation of if it tastes too good, how will I know to stop? And so, and also because how things get dispensed over that makes a difference on so that's that unpredictable shape. And then the last category that we look at is baked goods, because again, a wet and dry ingredient, then you add heat, has a whole other different effect to it. And so these are all the variables that all three of us, I think, are listening to the consumer and trying to help navigate so that they can read labels in the same way that they're used to in the grocery store.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I mean, cannabinoids like fat. They don't like water. So putting them into a beverage is a bit of a technological challenge, and that's what a lot of the food scientist people have been doing. But what consumers have been experiencing in the legal markets with edibles is a tremendous unreliability of dosage. They can buy one bag of candy, and one of the candies in the bag will get them more inebriated than they wanted, And another will not give them any experience at all, because somebody's going out and they're buying candy from another store and they're just spraying a cannabinoid on it, and there's no real uniformity. Or they're getting a chocolate bar and they're just putting a little drop of the cannabis in the middle of the bar. So if you don't eat the whole piece, you're not going to get anything. And so a lot of the challenge right now is around how we get to that homogeneous and reliable and predictable experience for consumers. And what we're seeing in the edibles category is that most people coming into edibles are not coming into it to get stoned. They're not coming in to get inebriated. They want low dosage, most of them less than 5 milligrams. They're just looking to take the edge off their anxiety or off their pain. And so we're seeing a lot of the activity is really going into the controlled dosage, portion-controlled experience.
Yeah, the technology is advancing very fast in this space. And you also have a lot of people coming into the space that are really pure entrepreneurs. They're not coming in with food safety backgrounds. They're not coming in with food science backgrounds. For example, the ability to get homogeneity throughout the product, that actually has been solved, and you can actually see it in the regulations. Topical application of existing food platforms is now banned in most locations for the reasons that we're talking of. Yeah. Microdosing, again, just a real reliance on making sure that the cannabinoids, the oils, are evenly and thoroughly dispersed in the foods, whether they're in liquid platform or food platform. So you're actually going to see, like you see in many places, technology is going to drive this industry and drive this space. The companies that are investing in technology and using it correctly are the ones that are going to survive. The people that are spraying or painting on candies they're buying at Costco and repackaging them, not so much.
So you're saying technology is driving the industry, and I agree, but also legalization is, the only reason that we can have all of these different products with all these different, stamps of approval and whatnot and sell it is because of legalization. And as that becomes more widespread, how do you guys see the cannabis edible market evolving? Like, will there be education courses? Will there be cooking classes with it? Will there be dinners you can go to that are just a bunch of courses? Like, just what are we, that's so new, like what are we going to be seeing more of?
Well, you're already seeing some of that.
Maybe I'm just not looking in the right places.
You're not getting invited to the right party.
Most of them are like in the pop-up category now because they are banned, I think, universally in the United States. And it poses an interesting question, and I think we have to ground ourselves. I don't know about anybody else in this room. I didn't go to a class to learn how to drink a beer. There was no book. There was no training. You kind of figure that out on your own.
But like wine tasting or something.
Well,
will there be an equivalent?
But there are
Yeah.
people, and particularly in California, we have these. We have the same way you have a sommelier, you have a cannabis sommelier.
Bud tender.
But the bud tender. But I'm talking specifically in the social where they are pairing the cannabis course with the wine course, with the dinner course. There's a cookbook coming out in November by 2 women out of the Bay Area, one who is a chef that leads it, and the other who's a producer of edibles. And the whole book is really geared towards the home chef. How do I incorporate this into my home? How do I work with these things and some of those technologies? So the fact that we're beyond having these conversations, that it is, it's what, you'll probably know how to say this better than I do, but the cultural shift of acceptance is much more, and the age is really...
Yeah, let's talk about that, the consumer.
Well, when we look at the edibles category, before legalization, I live in a state where, I live in Pennsylvania. It's just becoming medically legal there. We just had our first dispensary open. It's very controlled in terms of how you qualify for a medical card and so forth. But when we look at the legal states, there are so many new forms and new methods and ways to consume for people that happen with legalization that aren't present in an illegal or a regulated market. So what we're seeing is that a lot of the people, and let me just share this with you. In 2017 spring, 25% of adults in Colorado said that they had consumed cannabis in the past 6 months. That 25% went up to 35% a year later. And these people who are coming into it newly are generally not coming into it for inhalables. They're coming into it for edibles and for topicals. And they're doing it for more health and wellness reasons than they are for recreational purposes. And so what we're seeing in the edibles category particularly is that consumers not only want to know what the dosage is, but they want to know what experience they should expect. And so we're seeing more labeling of products for relax, sleep, energy, pain relief, things that will give consumers an idea of what the wellness benefit is that they're going to derive from that particular product.
Yeah, Scott, I know you'd, well, Merril first, and then I know you'd been talking about the sort of evolution of who is eating these edibles, or who is
Yeah, I'll build a little
consumer?
bit on what Linda said. I'll try to go through this very quickly. 70% of adults in the United States consume alcohol. So 70% of people in the United States, 70% of adults like to intoxicate in some form. And we haven't mentioned nicotine or caffeine yet, or pharmaceuticals. So you can build a pretty strong argument that about 95% like to intoxicate in some form. Medical programs come in, recreational programs come in, social norms start to shift. People get curious. If I like to intoxicate, now there's a new choice, I'm curious. But unless I'm a historic marijuana user, which most people are not necessarily, I don't necessarily want to smoke something. So what's driving is a very quick rise in the edible consumption as people enter this space. Microdosing, having an understanding of what the experience is going to be, these are all really key and critical points. I'll even go back to the first time I experimented with alcohol. I drank some scotch, I got sick as a dog, and I can barely smell scotch today and feel good about it. So you don't want that kind of effect, obviously, in a new emerging area. So yes, bud tenders, if you will, at the dispensaries, actually quite knowledgeable, and there will be more training that comes with that. And there will be room, in fact, a huge space for people that are sort of experts, but at a different kind of level, not lifelong marijuana users, but understanding which terpene might drive which type of effect in a person. And then the technology comes along where we can manage these experiences. The thing we haven't really mentioned yet on edibles is, if you think about it, and I say this with a grin, your mother's brownie or your college dorm brownie, you didn't know how long it was going to take you to lift off. When you finally did lift off, it was going to last the rest of the day into the night and maybe to the next morning. So with the technology that we've been able to evolve in the edible space, we can provide very reliable liftoff times, 15 minutes to 20 minutes, half hour, and then a compression of that experience so that it has a manageable half-life. Hour and a half, 2 hours, the experience is starting to end, so you can manage it. And you couple that with microdosing, low doses. Think about the afternoon barbecue. People are generally having wine coolers, beer, something along those lines. You want an edible or a drinkable, perhaps, that's going to mimic the strength of a beer. When you go to a barbecue, you don't want to get loaded up in the first 5 minutes and then spend the rest of the afternoon on the couch. So why would this be any different? Right? So that's the direction I think you see this going.
Yeah, and just to build a little bit more on the consumer question, the consumer is probably not who you think it is. The average age of the cannabis consumer is 42. This is not an 18-year-old living in his parents' basement. These are people who have jobs, they are raising families, they describe themselves as being more social, more physically active. They even, I love this one, are more likely by wide margins to say they're more satisfied with their lives than people who don't use cannabis. And I look at all this and I think, these are the people I want as my neighbors, not the people I want, what I used to think of.
No, and as we talk about cannabis, we're talking about the two predominant components right now, THC and CBD. The CBD wave, the desire for the anti-inflammatory effects, the calming effects that it brings, is just literally jumping off the charts. It is working for people, and people want more of it. So you can view it as both the psychotropic effect, the anti-inflammatory effect, or some combination thereof.
And I think that's a great touch point, because right now, as we talk about these 30-plus states that have some form of legalization, and you look at the CBD rise and those of us that are seeing it, and so how do you differentiate between what is in the grocery store or at the local, little shop down the corner versus what you should expect from a licensed dispensary type operation? And and then there's the whole discussion around hemp versus the other. And I think, just for the sake of education in this audience, maybe you can talk to that a little bit, because I think that's
okay. So component-wise, marijuana is marijuana, generally referred to as leaf. You smoke it, you get high. That combustion point is very important. The active ingredient in a plant is THC. Acid form, and if you eat that, you're not going to feel anything. It's just going to pass through your body. You have to decarboxylate it, decarb it, remove the acid, and that's done through a heating process. So the old people in the audience like me, that's why you did honey slides. You always had to cook it a little bit before you would eat it, right? Also in the plant is a whole series of terpenes, flavonoids, aroma chemicals, flavor components. The terpenes are generally associated with the specifics of a particular strain of marijuana. So when we talk about edibles, we're for the most part pulling the THC out, pulling the CBD out. Our starting point for CBD is 99.95% pure CBD. It's a crystalline material. The THC that we start with is roughly 85-90% pure THC. It's a molecule. It doesn't care what plant it came from, right? It's these terpenes that you layer on top of it so that if you're after a sativa or an indica or a train wreck or a gorilla glue or something like that, that's where these terpenes play a terrific role. So in the edible world, there's we're going to start probably talking about what's next, right?
Yeah.
So what's
Go
next
right ahead.
is we can take the plant components apart and then put them back together literally at will to drive experiences. So when you see and I'm going to revert to a vape cartridge or a piece of chocolate or something like that that says calm on it, that has the terpenes added back to it that are associated with calm. Now, for the food people in the room, and everybody's a food person, no structure function claims. Nobody's going to say that if you eat this, you will become calm. But there's an association because the database that allows for a structure function claim is actually still being developed.
Yeah, so we're running out of time, so I want to quickly pivot this towards the reason we're all here, smart kitchen, consumers, and applying that to cannabis edibles. So I'm just wondering, and the answer may be not at all, but how will the growing cannabis edibles market affect other sectors of the smart kitchen? Maybe smart appliances, maybe guided cooking, maybe food delivery, things like that. I mean, do you see this becoming something that we will have dedicated appliances for? There will be,
child
talk
safety
on
section of the refrigerator.
There is a company that just developed that, yeah, like a fridge lock.
Yeah,
it's
almost, I would suggest it's almost unending. Some of the products I would say that our company is developing or has developed is a concentrated emulsified form as a delivery system, completely water compatible, and then we can take the water out and put it into a powder form. So incorporation into food is going to become very easy. You can envision all kinds of metered dosing equipment, if you will. And if you go all the way to the other end, and I'm thinking about coffee right now, I'm not a coffee drinker, so I can say this with a smile on my face. Think about all the gadgets that are out there to do something as simple as brew a cup of coffee, right? Cannabis has a lot of flavor associated with it, a lot of aroma associated with it. I can think of several kitchen devices that would be very interesting to start with leaf and be able to brew a cup of tea. At the same time, remove the offensive bitterness or graininess that comes with it. And that's just as a starting point. You could have a gadget in the kitchen that will take leaf and you could actually have a small distillation process or an extraction process, taking the leaf, creating the oil, then using the oil with your olive oil to cook with. I mean, I think the potential is, just think of the gadgets that are around to make coffee.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Scott, I mean, cannabis likes fat. We're going to see infused oils. We're going to see infused butters and things like that coming into the kitchen. Some of it to be, THC that's going to have some kind of a psychoactive effect, and a lot of it containing CBD that is just to help me sleep tonight, and it's a bedtime snack.
Any thoughts, Merril?
Well, I think we're seeing this. I think it might have been on the Spoon, but somebody that is got their own little tabletop extractor for their home use. I think the future is there, and it's really just about following this trail of the same way with any kind of transparency. Where the plant's coming from as it moves state to state. How do you have that consistency as you license your brand to get and produce the same things? Securing the supply chain. We just came out of the conversation ahead of this on blockchain. I think that's a big part of the future of traceability, and we're going to continue to see it. And all of us here just want to make sure that there's an advocacy for safe use and an educational process for everyone, no matter which touch point they want to enter in or not.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to now open up the floor if anybody had any questions. If not, I have some of my own, but I thought this might be stirring some questions up in your mind, maybe. Yes? Striped, and then we'll go back.
Is there a half-life of effectiveness of the oil once it's extracted?
Yeah, depending on how you store it, it's actually quite long. The oil is fairly stable. If you keep it in the refrigerator at least a year, there's very slow decomposition, and I don't want to get too technical, but CBN, which is associated with calmness, sleeping, that's a species that will grow over time at the expense of THC and CBD, but it's a very, very slow process.
Is that the same for like edibles, like once it's combined with it?
Once it's combined with a food, depending on the platform that's technology that's used, they can range anywhere from extremely stable to so stability in terms of separation. The oils start coming back out, and that's really maybe the difference between maybe a Generation 2 and a Generation 3 platform.
All right, and right behind you in the blazer.
How long would you guess until big food jumps into the action?
Great question. How long until big food jumps in? Or they already are, I suppose. That's the answer to all of my questions. It's already happening.
Well, in a very visible consumer-friendly way.
Probably not until it's federally legal. Just they have so much to lose in terms of other licenses and so forth. Right now, if you are producing cannabis products, you are not allowed to take product across state lines in any way. Everything has to be grown, manufactured, packaged, and sold within the state. That said, I've done a lot of work with the food industry over the years, particularly in the area of functional foods and nutraceuticals, and I can promise you that it would be irresponsible of any company right now to not be looking at this. They might decide that it's not for them, or they might decide that it is, but they've got to be looking at it.
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that. You can see the activity that's going on in the space. Companies are, shall I say, getting ready, and the focus right now is on the CBD end of it. There's a pretty strong feeling and indication that the regulatory status of that will change much sooner than the THC components.
And I also just want to add, with Canada, that's going to really help accelerate how this comes in a year from now, what we see.
Yeah, we have to remember not to think the U.S. is the center of the universe here. Canada in 9 more days is recreational legal on a national level. So
but no edibles. No edibles for at least another year in Canada.
Till January 1, edibles, and the food companies are lining up. The activity is going on.
You can take a trip to Vancouver. Just kidding.
Just be
Do
careful
we have time for
coming
one
back
more
home
question?
again.
All right, one more question.
I just had a question about the state lines. So I didn't realize that you couldn't bring, edibles or marijuana across state lines. So if you, live in Washington, you can't buy something from Oregon or Colorado or California.
No.
It's kind of odd. You can buy it in Washington or Oregon. Say you buy it in Washington and you drive down to Oregon and you drive across the border. You can have it in Oregon. The only time you're breaking the law is when you drive across the state line.
But as a consumer, as a manufacturer, no, you cannot do that.
All right, thanks guys so much for a fascinating panel. It's been so exciting. Thank you.